Monday, March 17th, 2025, let's get into what you need to know about NATO and the Russia-Ukraine war, part 4, and we'll touch upon Coach Kelly's comment here. But first, let's go over a quick recap or review. In part 3, I discussed this 1984 secret no foreign article titled NATO Intelligence, a Contradiction in Terms, written by Lieutenant General Edward Atkinson. This article and numerous others in the 80s at the height of the Cold War and through the 90s and 2000s provide an intelligence assessment of NATO that indicated that European leadership and mindset on the collective security of Europe was very diversified. There was never a very solid, unified, and robust effort towards a military, warfighting, intelligence, or counterintelligence apparatus or effort. So all of those efforts through the 2000s have been nominal at best. In part 2, I point out that material reality likely favors Russia in a prolonged or protracted war. Why? Because Russia can sustain the losses and Russia can sustain military warfighting production. Also, Ukraine requires indefinite and substantial Western support. And even if they do get that support, NATO is weak and fragile without the United States. By the way, in fact, some people consider NATO to be the United States. NATO was in fact founded in Washington, D.C. Now there's treaties, alliances, agreements, and the U.S. has a vested interest in NATO. So don't worry about Trump taking the U.S. out of NATO. That's not going to happen. And we explain that partially in part 1 of my series. Yeah, that's right. You remember in part 1, in case you missed it, we discussed that the major U.S. defense contractors like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Northrop Grumman, and others have seen record profits and increased stock prices fueled by increased demands for weapons, including Javelins, HIMARS, Patriots, and others, especially due to conflicts like the war in Ukraine. We are 30 years past the Clinton era of NATO expansion post-USSR collapse, which saw focused diplomatic, detente, and political effort towards cooperating with the newly emerging Russia. Russia was no longer perceived to be a viable military adversary. Some even sought to bring Russia into the fold. NATO never committed to warfighting like defense or aggressive intelligence or counterintelligence, even when the threat of the USSR existed. Now, NATO is more of a diplomatic and political tool to ensure European country cooperation. And don't take it from me, this is discussed by multiple academics. Scholars hotly debate whether NATO enlargement caused a deterioration in relations with Russia, tensions with Russia, and if so, to what extent. This is important to understand. Scholars don't know, and military and political leaders are going to at least posture as if they're smart and savvy, but they don't have any answers for you either. So why do we see so many people that are most certainly making under $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 a year, most certainly have less than $5 million net worth? Why are they on social media arguing about who started the war? Regardless of who started the war, Ukraine will most certainly fall without substantial support from NATO. And NATO is weak and fragile without the United States support. And here's another kicker. Ukraine is not likely to ever become a member of NATO, as NATO has not even extended an official invitation yet. In a few years, we may figure out more specifics of exactly how we got here, and we'll try to learn from that and not forget. But for now, let's look to the future. Predictive analysis-wise, what are we looking at? Because there are a lot of indicators, such as the material realities and combat losses and economics, and the current peace talks that suggest that the full-scale wars in Ukraine and the Middle East that saw monster profits for these military corporations, it's not sustainable, and it's eventually going to die down or peter out soon. I think moving forward, we should ask ourselves exactly when and where will the next major military conflict be, because you know that's going to happen. Exactly what will the next pandemic be? Will it be swine flu again? Bird flu? Which will it be? What will be the next scandalous and hitherto unforeseeable economic collapse? What is the next major destroyer of our social fabric and unity going to be? Is it going to be another type of crime wave from street gangs or cartels or mafias? Is it going to be a different type of drug epidemic? Because we've already got those types of things going on currently. Is it going to be a hitherto unheard of extremist group, left or right, or some type of ethnicity or religion? What is the next charity manipulated natural disaster going to be? Or is there going to be another natural disaster that cartels or organized crime or elites benefit from? Keep in mind that all the while, multinational corporations are paving roads and building sewer and power and other infrastructure systems and digging water wells and building schools in Africa and all kinds of other far-flung corners of the world, while international banks are funding the global system primarily under the umbrella of the United Nations, and it has dozens of overarching non-government organization bodies. They have all the data and intelligence imaginable, and they are supposed to be working to prevent all of these calamities, and they always fail.